Welcome to CrossmenLive, the series. I'm Jack Brennicky.
And I'm Josh Sears. And today we are doing a dive into the traditions of the Crossmen. Many great traditions from early in the 70s as well as through more recent ones. So, Jack, you're getting us started off with the first one, right?
Right, since I'm from early in the 70s, I figured I would take the first two. Um, we're going to see something about the origin of bones. But before that, we have some information about unity hands, which we didn't call it that back then, but nonetheless, we got permission from Diane Denisowicz to read from her journal, which she wrote down back in the day. And the first one here isn't specifically about unity hands, but it is about unity. And she wrote this shortly after we were disqualified. And I think because the Corps, after that happened, I think the Corps was concerned that that was the end of the Corps. So that the merger was a failure, which we know it wasn't. But at any rate, the first entry was on August 2nd, 1976. 2 years ago, an idea was popping into people's minds. Within the ranks of the glory-deprived corps of the 507 Hornets and the Keystone Regiment, people with dedication and experience were dreaming of being in a corps which could use their talents to get someplace. It was a big dream that slowly turned into a reality, named the Crossmen Drum and Bugle Corps. So it was in the first year. We tried to create unity. So I thought that was interesting, the concept of unity from the very beginning. So about 3 nights later, this was our next journal entry, August 5th, 1976. Last night, we put on an impressive exhibition in front of 10,000 people who wondered why we weren't competing. To be truthful, we weren't in condition, but we laid everything on the line and did it to the fullest of our weakened condition. The people could see the intensity and they gave us a standing O. We marched on and off the field with our new hand clasp gesture. It makes us feel great. I don't know what the crowd thinks. It doesn't matter. We're making our statement.
Yeah, and I think that with unity, that's one of the great traditions that has spanned the life of the Corps. It's one that we did even while I was still marching, and even nowadays, with the amount of props, it's still one that the Corps tries to find a way to incorporate in one form or another. Like in my age out year in 2012, most of the Corps were taking off the props, but all the age outs, we got to do unity because we were the ones that were told you're not carrying props, so you can do unity. Or I think it was 2017, the Corps came onto the field in retreat block in unity. So it's one of those traditions that there's still a way to be able to find it in the Corps in one way or another. And now we've got another great tradition that's come from the 70s and continues on all the way through the present day, and that's bones. Jack was able to talk to the original bones. So let's take a look.
Our first and very distinguished guest today is Reverend Steve Calzone, chaplain of the Claymont, Delaware Fire Company No. 1, commander of the American Legion Post 18, also in Claymont, Delaware. He's a member of the National Association of Christian Ministers and a member of the Federation of Fire Chaplains. How are you doing today, Steve?
Good. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thanks. So, Steve, one of the very first traditions of the Crossmen, in addition to what is known as unity hands now, is the character Bones. And from what I understand, not only did you have a hand in creating the character, but you also were the first one to portray him. Can you tell us a little bit of how that came about?
Yeah, I did, and it was quite by accident as far as turning it into a tradition. But I had I was in a little junior corps when I was a kid, little parade corps, and I we would my the director would take us to shows and whatnot. And I saw the Crossmen in 1977 up in the Dream contest in North Jersey, and I had just moved from Long Island to Claymont, Delaware, which borders Delaware County, Pennsylvania. So when the Corps come out in the field, they were announced as being from Delaware County, Pennsylvania. And I thought, oh, that sounds like a plan. When I came to Delaware, I thought I would join the Blue Rock originally, and I found that they folded the same year that I moved to Delaware. So I thought, well, Delaware County is a hop, skip, and a jump. I would go out for the Corps in 78. Actually, 79, 77 was already actually in progress. Um, I made the timpani line. I went out for the drum line. And back in those days, if you remember, we carried everything. There was no pits like we have today. Um, and I think the big one was the 32 inch. Don't recall the exact size, but I had the largest of the four timpani. We had a local show. It was for the parents before we left on tour. And I had injured my back carrying that thing as big as it was. I was 16 years old, 1978. So my mother took me to the doctor and he says, I don't want you doing this anymore. So I didn't go on first tour. We had two tours that year. While I was home getting myself better, whatever, my back started feeling a lot better. The Corps came back. They had like 2 or 3 weeks, I believe, between first and second Corps. And during that time, they went to Allentown for DCI East. I had contacted Mr. Robinson about helping out the Corps. I knew I wouldn't make the field. My spot was taken. He said, well, your dues are already paid. You can come on tour with us if you'd like to. So I did. And I went to Allentown with the Corps, and I stayed with the equipment truck. I didn't even see the show in Allentown that night. And apparently after the show, I was told by some, guys that I knew in the Corps, girls that I knew in the Corps, what have you. There was a guy in the stands with a cape, wearing just regular clothes, but had a cape. And they asked me if I saw him. And I says, no. Well, one of the people I was friendly with in the Corps, her name was B. Jarman, and she was from Bristol, Pennsylvania. She was in the Guard.
Yeah.
And actually, it was kind of a joint idea. She said, what would you think about doing something like what he did? And I says, what do you mean? I didn't see him. And she said, dressing up and doing something in the back stands like that. And I said, well, I don't know. I don't know. I'll think about it. Well, we talked about it and talked about what we would look like and what it would look like. Then had no idea it would even take off. I said, well, I'll try it. I'll try it for one show and see what happens. I believe the first show was somewhere in Tennessee. We had two shows in Tennessee, if my memory serves me, and we were heading towards Texas on our way up to Colorado for finals that year. So I did it. There wasn't much fanfare about it from what I remember, but if you remember too, we used to sleep in gymnasium floors and we showered in school gymnasium. So the next day we're in the shower room getting washed and everything. And I'm hearing all the guys in the boys' locker room talk about, did you see that guy in the stands wearing that uniform? Man, that was so cool. I wonder who he was. And I thought, I think I started something. So I said, okay, I'll do it for another couple of shows and see how it goes. Well, then it started to just blossom. No one, they didn't know it was me initially. They didn't know if I was somebody on the tour or just a fan that kept showing up at the shows. I mean, the gossip in the locker room, and that's where I heard most of the gossip, was from the guys in the locker room where we were showering. And I'm sitting there keeping my mouth shut, just getting in my shower, getting dressed and whatnot. And I'm thinking, this is great. This is blooming into something really, really big. Well, they started trying to figure out who I was. And I would be up in the back stands. And all of a sudden, I see staff members heading towards the back stands. And they were trying to get, find out who I was and get a hold of me. And there were times that I had to literally run back down under the stands, get undressed. And I left a couple of uniforms under the stands. I think I went through 3 or 4 uniforms that year. with the exception of the mask, because I bought the mask in a costume shop, the skull mask that I had. There was one show in particular. There was a couple times that the judges wouldn't let me on the field. They even in the back stands, they were going to count me as an extra member, which would have, we had apparently our maximum membership on the field. So they said if I show up, they were going to count me as an extra member, which would disqualify the Corps. I always caught wind of this through the ladies in the chuck wagon. So when I heard this was happening, I wouldn't enter the field or go into the back stands. I would wait at the entrance gate as the Corps was getting ready to march on, and I would just be at the gate. And as soon as they got in the field, I would just leave, go get undressed and go back to the equipment truck. Well, with the mask on, it blocked my peripheral vision. So one of these shows that I was standing at the gate, I'm standing, the Corps lined up, ready to go on. The gate's still closed. And all of a sudden, Mr. Robinson is standing next to me. I didn't see him approach and come up because I couldn't see side to side. And all of a sudden I hear, hello. And I look and it's Mr. Robinson. And I says, I didn't say anything. I just nodded my head. I didn't speak when I was in costume. So he says to me, you know, everybody really loves what you're doing. And I nodded my head again. And he says, I hope you're going to be with us for the rest of the tour. Nodded my head again. Then he says, there was a little pause, and he says, you're not going to tell me who you are you? And I shook my head no. And then there was a little longer pause. And I don't know if I can say this on the interview. You might have to edit it out. He says, you son of a bitch. And he walked away. So that was, anyway, nobody spoiled the secret till the end of the year, even though a lot of them, I think, figured it out. DCI finals came in Denver. We were at Mile High Stadium that year. And once again, the judges said to Mr. Robinson, they called me their spook. They called me the spook. And they said, if your spook shows up in the back stands, he's going to be counted as a field member and you will be disqualified. So again, I caught wind of this and I did my at the entrance gate thing rather than step onto the field. And my whole goal was never to hurt the Corps, obviously. I just wanted to be a part of it. So I did that. And as soon as the last member of the Corps stepped on the field, I disappeared like I always did. Then I found out that they wanted me to lead the Corps on and off the field for retreat. Apparently retreat didn't matter how many people we had because we were not competing during that. And I guess it was one of the drum majors asked, you know, if anybody can figure out who he is, you know, we would like him to do this. So I catch wind of this, and this is my chance to be on the field with the Corps. So naturally I did it. I led them on the field. I led them off the field. And it was one of the greatest honors I ever had, not knowing they had plans to find out who I was. So as we get out of the field into this parking lot, and they must have figured this out because it went like clockwork. The Corps formed a complete circle around me and wouldn't let me out. And Donna Borelli, who was one of the two drum majors, Mark Metz, Donna Borelli, walked up to me and says, now we need to know. The show's over. The season's over. We need to know, am I going to do this or are you? So I knew what she wanted. So I said, I'll do it. And I took off my hat and I took off my mask. And I heard probably half the Corps, we knew it was you. We knew it was you. So that was, I figured that was the end of it. You know, it was something I did. It was the end of it. And I figured it was over. Figured it'd be no more, you know, I had no idea. I enlisted in the Air Force. I graduated high school and I went off to basic training. So for about 5 years, I didn't see any drum corps at all. After I got out of the Air Force, I went to a local show. I think it was the Westchester show. I'm not sure where. Anyway, it was a local show to this area. And I'm in the stands watching and I see Bones in the background. And I'm thinking, oh my God, they're still doing this. They are still doing this. So it went on apparently, and it still goes on, which I was very surprised. I guess 2000 would have been the 25-year anniversary of the Corps. They organized in 75. An article came out in Drum Corps World by Bob Fields looking for the original bones. My uncle was the one who got me into drum and bugle corps in this little parade corps that I mentioned earlier that I started out in. He was involved in this little drum corps, and my cousin marched in it as well. So that's what started my love for drum corps. So I didn't get Drum Corps World. He saw the article and he sent it to me. And I read the article. Obviously, I got in touch with Bob Fields. I knew Bob Fields through the Arch Repler Musketeers, which I am a member of still. And he asked me if I would consider doing bones in Allentown. Well, I didn't have a uniform anymore. So I said to my wife, yeah, I said, Laura, and she was in Archie with me too. I said, I want to do this, but I don't have a uniform. I said, I need a cape and sashes and a hat. So she said, I can make all of that for you. So except for the hat, we found a white Aussie style hat, and she actually pinned up the side for me and made a red band around it. And she made the cape and the sashes for me. And I just bought black pants and a black shirt and black shoes. And we went with it. So I was Bones at DCI that year.
So tell us a little bit about your military career, if you don't mind.
Okay, sure. Well, after, like I said, I joined the Air Force. As a child, I always wanted to be a firefighter. The same uncle that I mentioned earlier was a New York City firefighter, now retired. And I wanted to be a firefighter like my uncle. He was, I wanted to do everything he did. He was my idol, so to speak. So I joined as a firefighter. I spent 4 years active duty, got out, came back to Claymont, worked in the city of Wilmington as an emergency medical technician, and then rejoined the military in the Air National Guard as a full-time firefighter, and did that. And I'm I was an active volunteer in the Claymont Fire Company, which I also joined in 1978 as what they called a junior member. And at 18, I'm sorry, I joined at 16. At 18, I became an active member, which I'm still a member of the fire company. So I have 42 years of service with them. I gave up riding the equipment and fighting fires in 2010 because I just couldn't do it anymore with my back. Decided for some reason, got this calling to want to be a chaplain. Went and got certified as a chaplain, and they appointed me as their chaplain, which I still serve as their chaplain today in the fire company. But I said, I've, done 30 years of active firefighting and EMT work. I rose to the ranks of assistant fire chief. Loved every minute of it. If I could still ride fire trucks, I would, but just not physically able anymore. As we get older, that's just what happens. So, but there's not too much to tell, really. It's just I had a good career. I had a good run. Some of my injuries are due to my time in the fire service, but I don't regret it. I would do it again in a heartbeat. I love serving my country. I'm involved in the American Legion. We do a lot of work with veterans. I still help the fire company however I can. And my whole life, I guess, has been about service other than drum corps. That's my escape from reality, drum corps music. So that's what I do when I just need the time away from the reality of all the things I've seen and done. So, because some of them weren't pleasant in the fire service, obviously. I've seen some tragedies that, nobody should really have to see, but it comes with the job. I've also seen some things that we did that turned out to be good, and that's what makes it worth it too.
Oh, absolutely. So, yeah. Well, on behalf of the alumni, we thank you for your service and for creating Bones.
Well, thank you. Like I said, it was strictly a kind of a fluke. I never expected it to turn into what it did. I really didn't. That was not the plan. I'm glad it did. But it's not what I was, I didn't anticipate it becoming what it was. So, but.
Well, I spoke with Rick Reedy earlier in the week, and I'm going to see if I can share my screen with you here. Can you see that? Certificate of Appreciation?
Yes, okay. I do see that.
The Crossmen Alumni Association extends its appreciation to Stephen Calzone in the creation of the iconic figure whose presence independently represents all alumni in the personification of the Crossmen. January 16th, 2021. Rick Reedy, signed by Rick Reedy, CAA Chair.
Well, thank you. That's quite an honor. Thank you.
And in addition to that, we're going to send you one of these.
Oh, I don't have one. I would love to have one of those.
We're going to send you one along with that certificate I just showed you.
Wonderful.
And we really want to thank you, Steve, for creating Bones along with B. Jarman. And I appreciate you coming on the show, and thank you for everything. And we'll be talking to you soon, I hope.
Okay, hopefully. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
All right, bye-bye now.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
So you were around at the start when the contra flag first came about, right?
Yeah.
So how did that start?
So it was in the 2003 season. We had a member, his name was Shane Esterly. He had marched in 2002. I believe he was a baritone in 2002, and then was supposed to march with us in 2003 and ended up not marching. And what I remember of it is that as we came back east in the 2003 season, I believe it was around Allentown when it appeared, he presented to us a flag which basically was this black bed sheet with a giant red Maltese cross safety pinned on it. And it was something that we could take on the field for retreats, because we still had retreats at that time at every show. So, the drum line had their flag that they used to carry out, and, we had the horn line flag. And then, so he gave this to us to take out with us because we were behind the horn arc, obviously in retreat. And so we had this flag, and it went with us the rest of the season. So it started in 2003. I have pictures of it safety pinned, which is really just kind of funny to think about it. And I remember my mom, actually, we got done with the season, and my mom's like, "Hey, let me just sew it." And so we sewed it at the end of the 2003 season. So it's no longer safety pin.
I don't think the safety pins would have lasted more than 1 or 2 seasons anyways.
No, not at all.
So then what about, because it started having names on it. So where did the names come from?
So winter of 2003. So we're heading into December and January camps for the 2004 season. And we had really unfortunate, if I remember, it was like a week apart. 2003 flugelhorn player Sarah Solminski passed away in a car crash. And then I believe either the week prior or the week after, I don't remember the order. And who knows, it may have been even longer than that. Shane passed away as well. So we lost within the start of that camp season. We lost 2 members that we were expecting to have with us in the 2004 season. In fact, I remember Shane talking about coming back for the 2004 season. So that was tough. It didn't get any names put on it that season, but it still went with the section to all the retreats. But then the next year is where we started adding names, because in, I want to say December, January, I can't remember the exact month, Joe Kempf was killed while helping somebody in a really bad snowstorm that we had here on the coast. And I remember that a bunch of us were at the funeral for it, and we came up with the idea of, we just lost 3 people within a year, honestly, of each other that, we didn't know what to do. And so, 2 of these people had really close contact with the contra section, Shane being ready to march, and then Joe was the tech for the 2004 season for them. And so we decided to put those 3 names on the flag. And I mean, that's where it started in terms of the names going on there. We didn't really anticipate the number of names that would go on it in the next 5 to 10 years, because really it's been a lot recently. But that's where it started in that capacity. Now, granted, we stopped having retreats in 2005 at all the shows. So it slowly transitioned to going on the back sideline where it is at a lot of shows now. And I believe it still goes out, at retreats. But yeah, it was just kind of weird. It came out of nowhere, where we were all just kind of stunned. It really came out of a stunned moment at Joe's funeral of what do we do? And I don't even remember why, but we had the flag with us at the funeral. I don't remember why. It was there. Um, and then it just turned into we're going to add these names. So yeah, that's kind of where it started. And as it goes along, we've added people to it that, typically we know as the core ages, as alumni ages, more and more people are going to pass away. And we on the flag have typically put people that went before they were supposed to. So, in 07, you were there. I'm sure you remember this when Bill Kellerman died. A lot of the vets were really distraught. And so his name ended up on there. Dean Musson, when he passed away, as well, we put him on there. That was a really tough one, for me, because he was the core director my rookie year. And so it's been a labor of love, and it's also been really tough at times when we put those names on there, because we know that there are decades of people that have connection to some of these guys, and it's just really tough. But at the same time, it kind of became a thing of like, hey, because we're kind of a weird core, right? We got a dude that dresses up with a skull mask in the back stands, like, so we're already on that trend of like we're obsessed with bones and skulls and things like that. So here it is. We take this flag on the field with them, and it just is a reminder of all the people that came before, and that are still with you on the field when you're performing. It's kind of a weird thing to think about, but it was also that, like, hey, this is us. And it's really cool that I feel like the core has assumed a little bit of the identity with it too, and that it's not just a tuba thing. That the rest of the horn line especially gets it. But it's also cool to be able to do this for the alums, especially those 70s, 80s, 90s alums that are connected with these people that are on there. So.
Wow. I had no idea. I didn't know very much about the contra flag other than its existence, but I didn't know all of that.
Yep. And that's one of the great things about really doing this deep dive into the traditions of the core. There's so many of them out there. People are aware of them. We know of particular traditions, but we don't necessarily know the story behind them all either. Or we only know portions of the story. We know part of how some of these traditions came about, but we don't know the full story. And so that's something that we're in the process of continuing to work on, is finding more of these traditions. And we want to know where some of these traditions started. And you'll see in some of the ones that we talk about going forward, we don't know the full story, but we want to. And so if you know where the story came from, how a tradition started, if you are part of that, let us know, because we want to hear your story. And so some of them it's easy, like with these cross necklaces, we knew exactly who to go to, and Aaron and Taylor helped us out with that, and they tracked down the first person to wear one of the cross necklaces. So let's take a look.
What is the very beginning of the cross necklaces, and how did they come to be?
So the very beginning of the cross necklaces happened in 2000. My mom would drive me and Chris Hamilton and a bunch of people from our high school up to Newark, Delaware. And she needed something to do all weekend, so she stopped at the craft store, and that was, I guess, what moms did back then. And she found the crosses in with like fraternity and sorority things. And so she painted 2. And Chris got one and I got one. And then eventually that summer, I think it went all the way to the color guard, and that was about it. They didn't go full on out into the Corps until 2001. And then it was still tough because she made them in very small batches because she could only buy them in like little bags. And it was like, here's one for you. Don't tell anybody. Here's one for you, you know, because it was hard. I couldn't even give them out by sections because we didn't have that many.
Okay, so the second question was, what was the reaction that you got the first year in 2000 when you only had a few? I imagine it was probably a pretty good reaction that it kept you wanting to make more and kept your mom wanting to make more. How did people respond?
Yeah, everybody would, I mean, I guess everybody just really wanted one and they'd ask me all the time. And then my mom started to come to the camps. Y'all started walking up to my mom. And so then my mom actually went and found somebody to take the cross and make a pattern, and then he would make tons of them. This older gentleman that she knew, and he would paint or cut them all by hand on his little jigsaw. So then she'd bring them to camps, and I don't know if you guys remember, people's parents would sit there and like sand them, and then they would paint them, and they had this whole assembly line. I remember it most vividly when we were at Kutcher's because she had like an entire assembly line. We had the sewers and then the cross makers.
So Jen, tell us, you know, the crosses are now a very long-standing tradition within the Corps. You mentioned that you even volunteered a couple years ago and they gave you a cross, and geez, you had the original one on, you know, 20-something years ago. How does that make you feel that the crosses are now firmly implanted within the Crossmen as a tradition?
I was really surprised. Even to hear you say that again kind of gives me goosebumps. I didn't realize it until I showed up to volunteer. And so seeing it again was really awesome. Seeing the kids and seeing that they turned it into plastic, that was a great idea. Because if you guys remember wearing them in the showers and falling apart. So yeah, I think that's, I don't know, it's really special. I'm glad that my family could make that impact on the drum corps.
I know one tradition that I want to know the origin story of, Leanne, is Amen Hallelujah. You said you know when that started and the story behind that?
Yeah. So weirdly enough, the reason that I know the story behind that is because the person that started it came in and did a clinic at Field of View, which is the color guard, the indoor guard that I was a part of. And he just casually mentioned it in passing as if it weren't a big deal. But it apparently just started in 1996. And the guy who started it, his name was Donald Shorter. And it, from what I understand, it basically just started as they were messing around one day and just literally started singing Amen Hallelujah. And it became a song, and then they proceeded to kind of make it a pre-show thing. And pretty much throughout my entire marching career, we sang it walking on the field, which is actually pretty common in the color guard world. Like Crown sings, I think they sing You Are My Sunshine or something similar. But yeah, 1996.
In 2012 pre-show, they showed the different sections of the battery doing their pre-show little things, singing different songs and everything.
Yeah.
So the snares were doing some kind of a Gregorian chant type thing.
Yeah.
You remember that?
I do. Okay. So it's funny because those little just subsection rituals tend to change a little bit every year. Just, I don't know, usually they start from something that would have happened early in move-ins or in pre-move-ins or something like that, some kind of memorable. So I know that Gregorian chant, I think, came about because in our, pre-move-ins week, I think we had watched Ace Ventura or like we're hyped on that, so we kind of copped that. But like half the section was music majors as well that had to do like voice training and knew how to sing and knew music theory, so we could, I don't know, they would add all these weird 4-part augmented 7th harmonies on top of this stuff. So we would go through that whole Gregorian chant and just like, alrighty, then on some weird chord. So it was always nice to kind of zone in with each other on that. And I know the quads definitely had, I can't remember if this was 2012 or 2013, but one of the years they were singing to themselves one of the songs from Mulan. I think it was like "Be a Man, must be swift as a coursing river," and that was their hype. But it was funny because like it kind of changed every year. But I know for 2012, 13, and 14, that Gregorian chant in some form kind of stayed the same, which was nice to have some consistency, a little like history. By the time we were aging out, and you guys come, was like, "Oh yeah, we've been doing this for years."
Tim, what about something for the horn line?
Oh, well, they're definitely not as cool and creative as the other ones. Most of the time, especially with the baritone wrench or the soprano bat, it was always something like, hey, that looks kind of heavy. Let's carry this around for years and years. Like, okay, cool. Onto the block. It just, we're so dumb. But it was always something that we'd kind of rally around and like, all right, now you have to carry it. And it did bring everyone together. It was a lot of fun. The joke became, okay, what other kind of funny object can we carry around that would kind of make fun of that? I think that was usually my idea. But most of the time, it was not as creative as some of the other ones in the sections.
That's another thing that there's a lot of are flags. So there's the hornline flag, which started a lot further back. Need to get Rick Reedy to talk about how that started, but it's a replica of, it was originally an original flag, show flag from back in the 70s. And then shortly after the move to Texas, a replica of a 77 show flag replaced it, and that became the one that Tim and I carried. And Leanne, do you know when the drumline flag, the Black Jolly Roger, started appearing?
That's a really good question. I feel like I feel like when my rookie year, I feel like it was around, but I also feel like it might have been around in 2003 too.
I've heard a few stories about that. I mean, I'm not sure when it first came around either. But I want to say it was like early 2000s when a previous object existed, and then the hype turned into it being a flag that we carried. But yeah, I think like early 2000s sounds about right.
I just text Tim, he's in the other room, to see if they had it in 2001.
Nice.
I don't know if they did or not, but I definitely feel like it was around in 2004. But to be totally honest, I didn't pay attention much.
Was it? Because I know definitely in 2012 we started bringing it out to lots, and had our techs hold it like during shows, and we would like kind of like Hornline does, like have the flag at every show. Leanne, do you know if that was a thing that was happening like 2010 and before?
I think so. Just because I don't know if you know the name Kelly Howe. She was the cymbal player back in the day, and then she was actually one of the cymbal techs for a while, and she knows Melissa. I have like visions of Kelly when she was marching and playing cymbals, of the cymbals having that in the lot. I don't know.
When did the battery start? When did the drumline start flying their Jolly Roger flag out of the bus at shows? Anyone know?
That may have been going on for a while too, actually. I feel like some of these took a break at some point in time. And honestly, if we're gonna guess, it was probably when we moved to Texas. Like some of these traditions just kind of went away a little, just because like I don't know, there was probably only like one or two people in the drumline, I think, when we moved from Texas.
I'm sure things got lost. Like I remember the flag that I remember carrying was well, you could start like second generation flag. It wasn't the original from the days in Pennsylvania. I remember that. Like, yeah, it must have gotten lost at some point, and then we had purchased a new one, but same idea, same traditions. I'm pretty sure that was the thing that happened.
Yeah. I don't know. It's hard to remember.
Yeah,
And what about the
kind of
color
leaves
guard
it open
flag?
to legend.
When did that come about? Because that's the most recent of the three.
The color guard flag? Oy. That I want to say that appeared in 2010. I think an alumni sent it to us, sent it to Danielle Reedy. And we just thought we wanted a flag. So
The other sections have one, so why not?
yeah, I don't think we carried it to warm up very long. I think it lasted like 2 shows and we were over it. But we definitely flew it out the top of the bus when we pulled in the lots and stuff.
Leanne, tell us about the poodle skirt. Poodle skirt.
Oh, I wish it was a poodle skirt.
Poodle skirt.
Needs to be.
Okay, I've heard multiple stories about the poodle skirt, and now I'm saying it over the years, but from what I basically understand is there was a girl in 2000. Her name was Nicole Morrison, and she, as all these traditions seem to be the case, just wanted to have something on tour to kind of like break up the monotony and make it more fun. So she packed the poodle skirt and another skirt that she wore for like dance class at home when she was little or something. And then they would wear it to dance classes on tour. And basically from there, it got passed to the next person, and then it just kept being a thing. And so it's been kicking since 2000, and it has the names around the inseam of all the people that have had it, which is pretty cool. It's been repaired many a time.
It's 20 years.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and so the poodle skirt's basically, it's become like an honor to get the poodle skirt, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah, and
the person who gets it, they don't find out until they actually get it that they're getting it, right?
Yeah, and like what we used to do was we would wear it for the first time on the morning of the very first regional. I know that didn't necessarily pass along, but I had the skirt for obviously a lot of time. And I always tried to give it to someone who wasn't a captain, and that tradition has seemed to kind of continue. It's always went to someone who is a vet, who has made a big impact but isn't necessarily a captain. So I kind of like that about it, because it gives a little bit more recognition to the people who aren't necessarily in leadership positions, but still kicking. It still looks pretty good.
It was funny, something that we kind of started was in the transition between 2011 and 2012, because I think that transition was such like a pivotal year, or pivotal transition of just like, in so many ways, including kind of taking old traditions and starting new ones. Like, for example, us, like the drumline yelling boots, that sort of changed. And I was glad to be a part of some of that kind of stuck around for a few years, where, you know, before shows, drumline would huddle up, and then it wasn't always like a screaming boots unless it was like finals or a regional. It was just like 1, 2, 3 boots, let's go. And then it kind of evolved 2012 and beyond into just like a screaming rage fest every time. Like whoever is gonna count it off, if you couldn't understand any of the words, then that was how you're supposed to do it. And it just kind of devolved from there into just a chaotic
Brandon, do you know like where boots came from?
Yeah. There's a story that we got to tell, you know, every year, and it kind of became the storytelling night. Usually the night before a regional. Sometimes it ended up being like before Allentown. That way it was those that kind of got through most of the season, right? That didn't, you know, end up having to leave or were cut mid-season for some reason, you know, keep it a thing that those that were going to stick it out to the end of that season got to hear. So we usually wait until the night before the Allentown regional, to kind of huddle everyone together. Anyone that was on percussion staff, the techs were allowed to hear it. Like any former members that were present for it, we could come by, and then usually it was the section leader that was able to tell the story, or I'll say like the oldest member, one who had been there the longest. So for a few years, it was me and Maddie Smith. By the time it was 2014, it was me and her kind of telling it together, and then she was the one that was telling it after I had aged out, and then it was always like that was a really special night because it was the same feeling as after the first show when we get our crosses. It was like, man, I'm in something now. I'm like part of something. It was always really special to kind of lay on the gravity of what the story meant on that night, to kind of even more so have these new members feel like a part of something deep and long-standing. I mean, without saying too much, it was like the origin happened back in '78.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there were details that have gotten muddled that are more legend than truth. But at this point, I mean, nobody knows. And to an extent, like, it doesn't really matter, because the point is to have a story that's inspiring. And if it makes you feel something, then it's effective. It's not like a tactic, but it's something that like binds us all together. And you almost want it to be lost into legend and hearsay, and we heard that this happened, but it might have been this, but we're pretty sure that this is what really happened. And it was almost like a discussion and kind of like playing around with the ideas of, man, we can't do that nowadays. But yeah, so that story nights like that were always really nice.
I think that's the best part about that story, is that like I don't really truly know that story, and from what I've heard, every single time someone even remotely tells me the gist of the story, it sounds like this big tall tale that no one really knows the origin to it.
Yeah, parts of it sound too good to be true.
Which in a way, isn't it kind of sad that some of our traditions, it's like if there's no one there to tell them, they might not make it another year.
Well, and that was why
like,
the move in '07 was so important. I mean, Leanne, you can speak to that. Why the vets who came back was they wanted those traditions to stick around. They wanted the Crossmen to be the Crossmen and not turn into something completely different.
Yeah. And even then, like, with however many of us went down, I don't remember what the number was. I want to say like 16 or 17 of us. Even then, it was still hard to keep some of those traditions alive, just because we were walking into staff members who just had a way that they did things, like caption heads that had a way they did things, and that may not have necessarily included singing Amen Hallelujah when we walked on the field, stuff like that. Just even then, it was kind of hard to keep things around.
That's what I was going to say, is a lot of the traditions, some of them can be kind of selfish of, like for instance, I had a regional shirt that I'd wear every regional, and that was it. Like that would kind of end with me. But the ones that were based in the history or would kind of bring people together, they didn't pick on anybody. They were, in good spirits or just kind of goofy. The ones that really stuck around were, kind of worth it. They would withstand the test of time. So a lot of the time it was based on history or, bringing everybody together. If it was selfish or if it was just plain weird, it'd be fun for a little while, but it just, it wouldn't see more than 3 years usually. So it's really cool to see kind of what's still kicking.
What's your favorite tradition? Leanne. Doesn't have to be guard, can be any section. Your favorite tradition.
My favorite tradition is, can I have two?
Yeah.
My favorite tradition is Long Live, and the things that the drumline do on the bus.
So yes, Leanne, tell us about Long Live, because you started.
Long Live was basically just, when I aged out, I wanted to kind of leave something behind. And it basically just kind of became a battle cry when you needed it, basically. Just something to kind of shout out before run-throughs or shows, or basically anytime you really needed to push through something. It just kind of became something that got us through rehearsals and shows. And yeah, I'm really proud that it's still around.
So, Tim, what are your favorite tradition or traditions?
I would have to say the hornline flag, just because of kind of what it means. It's a piece of history we can carry around, flying it out of the bus and trying to have fun with like making people look at it, and then trying to keep it away from trees and power lines. That was pretty funny. When I had it in the 4th of July parades and like trying to hand it off to the guard, and they're like, "Ugh, I'm not touching it." Like, that's bad luck. I'm like, okay, I didn't know that. There's just so much hype around it. It had a spike on it, so you can like stick it into stuff. It was always just really cool, and I mean, you never really get lost with it. It's always going to be somewhere. You can always find it up front. That was definitely important to me. Other than that, I did like the regional shirt. That just doesn't count. I stick with my first answer.
And what about you, Fish?
My favorite, I think, definitely the most impactful is story night of like with the drum line talking about boots, because I think for us that is like the most secretive, like most heavily guarded secret of the drum line is what boots means, right? And like tons of drum corps have that, like cavies have what splooey means, and 6 words for the coats, and it's like these forbidden secrets that very select few know, and that going into that story night you're about to be part of something, kind of like what I was saying before. So I know that's definitely the most meaningful and impactful tradition, I think, is being included in that like in that history. That, and I know there was another one that just came to mind.
I know one of my favorites is the cross punch before shows. Like when you're at the gate and just basically having that fist pump with everyone one at a time and getting to hug each other and wish each other a good show.
Tradition! Again, more stuff that I don't know a whole lot about, of having marched back in the day at the beginning of the Corps. Traditions hadn't really taken a foothold yet. I mean, foundations were being laid for a few of them, but these are all pretty cool. And I also think that it's interesting that the good ones stand the test of time, and that the ones that were like, kind of fell by the wayside.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing where you can kind of mark 2007 as a defining point in really being able to, the Corps taking a look at its identity and being able to assess, what do we truly want to be? What do we want to continue to be going forward? And those few first years in Texas really kind of finding these are the traditions that are truly important to us. That's like we had with the contra flag, why some of those vets came down, because they wanted to make sure that some of these things that were important to them truly survived such a drastic and big change. There are also some great ones that happen from the design team as well. And Ed Devlin, one of our drill writers from both the early 2000s as well as the early 2010s, 2 different times, was one of the ones who was constantly putting the cross in the drill in some form. So he is this month's staff spotlight with Aaron and Taylor. So let's take a look.
Ed, You have a long history in the DCI and WGI activities. What are a couple of highlights from your career?
Well, I would say the highlights of my career in WGI and DCI is seeing the phenomenal performances that I've been involved with. We work towards developing programs for the memberships to come out and perform, and that is the best part, seeing those moments being realized by the memberships that we have, either indoor or outdoor. That's why we do this. We don't do it for ourselves. It's for a group of people to be able to communicate and work as one and go through a goal of being fantastic. And that's my highlight. I can't really pick one particular thing. I guess one thing would be is that whatever I do for WGI and DCI with the groups I'm involved with, I give 1,000%. I think that's the key to it, is that if you're going to do this, you got to do it at the highest level in terms of your dedication to it.
You obviously had some history with the Corps as a Crossman staffer and design team and everything else. And you're also a Hall of Famer as well. Can you tell us a little bit about the roles that you've played with the Crossmen, and how has your current role changed with COVID-19?
All right. Well, I've been the drill designer of the Crossmen. I am currently the program coordinator for the Crossmen, and also the staff coordinator. So those roles have been not the change from going from the drill design to program coordination was really based upon that you really only have the mindset to be able to do one job. To try to do drill design and program coordination doesn't work these days. So you have to be focused on that. I think in the COVID times, it's been interesting because we have to offer everything virtually. So you kind of lose that connection that you develop with staff and membership because you're not in the same room together. So you have to find a way to be able to reach out and still have that try to develop that level of connection, which is really difficult. So I would say that is the biggest challenge right now in the COVID time. We're basically working through that. We're creating a regular drum corps show for 2021. And whatever steps we have to do within the staff to the communication to the membership, that's what's taking place.
Can you give a quick summary of the show design process?
Sure. Show design process, a little different in COVID because, we would typically have a meeting in, September to kind of lay out what our process would be for the show. During the course of the summer, you're working through and you're seeing the show that you've created. So you're already starting the process about what you want the corps to look like in the next year. So that starts in the summer that you're in. And then we sit down as a group, the design team, brass arranger, percussion, color guard, drill design. We all sit down and we talk about what we want the corps to look like. What do we want that message to be for the show? One of the things that are different for us this year is we have Andrew Mockworth had written all the music. So now I have a whole level of, I have a percussion arranger, I have a pit arranger, I have the soundscape person, I have the brass arranger. So there's 4 that I have to now communicate and deal with where I only had 1 before. So it is different, and dealing with it where we're not in person every day is different. So that is a little bit of a challenge, but the team that I've assembled is pretty fantastic. So they're pros. So that's what we do, is then we'll sit down, we'll talk about what we want the corps to look like. We want to, when we look at show, we always think about what is the effect of the program. Not about the technical. People aren't going to remember you for the technical things. They're going to remember you for the emotional connection they have to you and the audience. So that's what we think about in terms of the design. So then we'll throw out music ideas. This year we did some ideas with the music first, and then put the concept to it for this coming 2021 season. So you can do it either way. You can either do the concept and find the music and put it in there, or opposite. So there's different ways of making that happen. So you take it from there, and then, you know, the music grouping have their little meetings. Visual, we have our little meetings and kind of work through with each other, and then we all come back as one whole main group of design team, because we have some consultants, you know, that like Al Chaz, who's been with the Corps forever. He's a design consultant. He'll participate in those monthly calls where the small design team, I'll call it like little groups of small design team, we will meet a lot, and then we bring everything together. We put everything in a Dropbox. There's files, there is, you know, write-ups about what each movement will look like visually and musically. So there's different options about how that would be.
Are there any things that the design team keeps in mind when designing specifically for the Crossmen?
Yeah, I think we, you know, over time, we've always thought about, you know, how, is there something in the show that can reflect the Crossman tradition in history? You know, if you look at over a period of time, the use of the cross in the visual design, you know, and how that would break in, you know, how we utilize that at various times. The aggressiveness of the Crossmen over time, you know, we've, in this past, in 20, I can't say this past season, 2019, was, I would say, was like an epic Crossman show, where how aggressive it was, and, you know, at you all the time. And, you know, we look at how we can make those ideas come across, but still now have a 2020 feel to it, or 2019 feel to it, or 2021 feel to it. So we're always looking at how we can, you know, make that, you know, that connection to something. It might not be a lot in the show, but we look at percussively, we always, the Thurston Lick is always in the percussion book every year, you know. So those things, how we tie that back to the Crossmen, and how that always, you know, that's really reflective of what that drumline was all about. And, you know, so we look at what the Corps has done and what we can do to make it happen again, but not, you know, obviously like the Corps had done it before, but keeping that approach. And I think the key to everything we do with the Crossmen is that there is that the hard work, I would say, is a tradition that we have not given up on. And I've always found the Crossmen to be a hardworking group. And I think that every member that I've been with now, since I came back in 2011 till now, in 2020, and now going into 2021, it's all about hard work. And those kids from that time to now are not afraid of hard work. And I think that's a real Crossman tradition. Yeah.
Let me ask you, is there anything that you would like to say sort of in conclusion here to Crossmen, past, present, or future? Is there anything you'd like to leave us with?
I would just say, keep the faith in the Crossmen. You know, we are going to continue to make a great show for you every year. And, you know, don't be afraid to reach out to me. Doesn't mean I'm going to completely listen to everything you say to me, but I'm going to listen to you. You know, I get a lot of people say, I've gotten messages, you need more red flags, or you need more this, and you need more that. And believe me, I would like to make everyone happy. But, you know, within our goal of what we want the design to be, that's, you know, that's how I have to look at it. But don't be afraid to talk to me. You know, let's talk about some Crossman traditions that I don't know about. Let's talk about your experience with the Crossmen. You know, reach out. This is all about communication. You know, I'm always here for, you know, Crossmen alumni from whenever, even when I wasn't with the Corps. I'd love to talk to people about what the Crossmen represent. And, you know, obviously we need more money. We need donations, you know, and I know we're beating you up about that now, but, you know, we're definitely, we need your help. This is only going to go forward if we're all in the boat together, and we need to keep this going down the stream.
So that was most, though not all, of the crosses that were in Crossman Drill through the years. Many thanks to Gio Ayala for putting that together. He did a wonderful job. Thank you, Gio. So that pretty much wraps us up for this month. Don't forget, you can always text to donate. You can text X-Men 2021 to 41444 to donate. Again, X-Men 2021 to 41444. So Jack, what do we have coming up next month?
Well, next month is our cooking show. That's right, you heard it right. Our cooking show. And it's all about all those wonderful people who made food for all of us through the years. And we're actually going to have some demonstrations of meals that were made for the Crossmen. So it's kind of a scientific / art show. So the science of cooking and also the art of cooking for over 200 people every day in the hot sun. So that'll be our show next month. So
make sure that next month you don't eat that day so you can come ready, hungry to make one of those recipes that we talk about.
So join us for the cooking show next month. I'm Jack Brennicky.
And I'm Josh Sears, and this has been Crossmen Live. We'll see you next month.